In the village of Ndaba, where the sun painted the savannah in gold and the winds carried stories of spirits, a young girl named Amara waited for her parents outside the school gates, clutching her little satchel filled with books and dreams. Her parents, distracted by the chaos of the morning, had promised to pick her up after class, but never returned. As the shadows grew long, the walls of the school, painted in fading red and ochre, seemed to stretch and whisper secrets of forgotten children. The teachers had gone home, leaving Amara alone, and the corridors echoed with the faint sound of laughter that wasn't hers, like ghosts playing among the desks. She tried to leave, stepping into the red dust courtyard, but every path seemed to twist unnaturally, leading her back to the gate where her parents should have been. By sunset, the air grew heavy, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint hum of distant drums, and the sky turned crimson, reflecting the fear growing in her chest. Shadows moved strangely, lengthening and twisting, and whispers called her name, soft and sad, like the village itself was speaking. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the school's hallway, tall woman with skin like polished ebony, hair flowing like a river, and eyes glowing faintly blue. She smiled, not cruelly, but with a haunting sadness, and said, "You have been forgotten, child, but the spirits will guide you." Amara's heart raced, unsure whether to run or follow. The woman reached out her hand, and as she did, the whispers grew louder, telling tales of children lost and found, of parents careless and spirits watching. Amara took her hand, and suddenly the school seemed alive, its walls bending, floors shifting, and corridors stretching endlessly. She realized she had stepped into a world beyond the ordinary, a place where forgotten children were taught lessons by spirits older than the village itself. She walked with the woman, learning that neglect had consequences, that even a parent's love could falter, and that the unseen world would always notice those left behind. As night fell, the moon cast silver light through broken windows, illuminating desks that floated, books that whispered their own stories, and shadows that danced to rhythms of old drums. Amara understood then that her parents' forgetfulness had opened a doorway to the spirits, and only by heeding their guidance could she return safely. And as the red moon rose over Ndaba, the village slept, unaware that one small child had entered a world where forgotten souls were never truly lost. As the crimson sun sank behind the hills of Ndaba, Amara followed the mystical woman deeper into the abandoned school, the red dust swirling around her small feet like spirits dancing to the wind's rhythm. The hallways, once mundane and painted in dull red and ochre, now stretched impossibly long, their walls bending and whispering in languages Amara had never heard but somehow understood. Desks floated slightly above the ground, and books opened on their own, pages flipping to show drawings of children who had been forgotten long before her. The mystical woman spoke softly. Every child left behind carries the weight of the unseen. Here you will learn to listen to what the world ignores. Shadows began to crawl along the walls, forming shapes of animals and ancestors, their eyes glowing faintly. Watching Amara carefully, testing her courage, she realized this school was not a place of punishment, but a realm of learning from the spirits of the past lessons for children whose parents had been careless. One shadow, shaped like a lion, stepped forward, its amber eyes glowing, and whispered, "Bravery is born from fear. Amara's heart pounded, yet she stepped closer, and the spirit bowed its head. Every classroom told a story. Some had rivers flowing through them with floating lanterns, carrying tiny glowing souls, while others were filled with soft blue fire, hovering above desks, each flame representing a forgotten child's memory. Amara walked through corridors where the air hummed, carrying echoes of laughter and cries, teaching her that even neglect left marks on the soul. The mystical woman guided her to a large hall where a glowing tree had sprouted from the floor, its roots entwined with books, toys, and small trinkets, forgotten things left behind by absent parents. "This tree remembers," the woman said, "and it teaches those willing to see." Amara placed her hand on the tree, feeling warmth and sorrow flowing through her, understanding that while her parents' forgetfulness had brought her here, the spirits of the school had chosen to help her. Night fell fully, and the moon cast silver light through the shattered windows, illuminating floating spirits that danced gently in the hall, whispering advice, warnings, and encouragement. Amara realized she had a choice: to return to the world of the living wiser and stronger, or remain in this mystical school forever, learning secrets hidden from careless eyes. Her small hands clenched her satchel, the memories of waiting alone at the school gate mixing with the warmth she now felt from the spirits guiding her. She smiled faintly, understanding that neglect could open doors to magic, that forgotten children could gain knowledge beyond the ordinary, and that the spirits of African lands always noticed those left behind, ready to teach them in ways no parent ever could. By the time dawn painted the sky with orange and gold, Amara felt stronger, braver, and wiser, ready to face her careless parents with a courage born from the whispers of the spirits, who promised to always be near, guarding, guiding, and reminding her that even in neglect there is magic waiting to be found. By the time Amara had moved deeper into the mystical school, the hallways had transformed into something unrecognizable, alive with soft whispers and flickering shadows that danced along the walls as if the building itself were breathing. The corridors stretched endlessly, their red and ochre paint peeling to reveal carvings of forgotten children, animals, and spirits who had once wandered these halls, and every step Amara took seemed to echo with laughter, both joyful and sorrowful, blending into a rhythm that resonated with her heartbeat. The mystical woman guided her carefully, her hand warm and steady, saying, "Here, the spirits teach those who have been left behind. They speak in echoes, and you must listen closely." Floating books spun slowly above desks, each one opening 2 pages filled with drawings, symbols, and maps of unseen realms, showing children like Amara, who had once been forgotten but had learned to navigate the worlds between the living and the spirits. Shadows began to shift into shapes of creatures she had only seen in tales, lion spirits with golden eyes, snakes coiled in midair, and birds whose wings glimmered with ethereal light, each moving silently, observing her courage and curiosity. In the central hall, a large mirror floated, reflecting not Amara's face but countless versions of her, each showing a different path she could take, one as a brave child who returned home wiser, another as a guardian of the forgotten, and one who vanished completely into the hall of spirits. The mystical woman whispered, "Every choice carries weight. The world notices when children are left behind." Amara stepped closer to the mirror, feeling the warmth of the glowing tree from the previous hall in her chest, the spirits around her humming softly like a lullaby. Suddenly, shadows formed into familiar shapes, other children who had been forgotten by their parents, their faces glowing faintly, their eyes wide with both fear and hope. They reached out silently, welcoming her into their fold, and she understood that she was no longer alone. She was part of something bigger, a lineage of children guided by spirits who had watched over the forgotten for generations. Lessons came swiftly. Whispers taught her courage, patience, and how to listen to the unseen, while the floating desks and books revealed secrets of magic, ancestral knowledge, and the hidden patterns of life. Hours or perhaps days passed in this realm, time bending around her, until she realized that the red moon outside the shattered windows was fading, signaling that the world of the living called for her return. The mystical woman smiled softly and said, "The parents may have forgotten, but you will remember. And one day you will teach those who are left behind that even in neglect there is a path illuminated by the spirits." Amara's heart swelled with courage and understanding. The school had tested her, shown her fear, and taught her wisdom beyond her years. When the first light of dawn filtered through the cracks of the school, the hallways seemed to sigh, the floating books settling, and the shadows bowing gently as if bidding her farewell. Stepping out into the courtyard, Amara felt the red dust under her feet, carrying with it the echoes of laughter, whispers, and lessons of the spirits. Ready to face her careless parents with the knowledge that she had been seen, guided, and transformed by a world the living seldom understand. As the red moon climbed higher over Endaba, Amara followed the mystical woman through a hidden corridor that opened onto a vast hall, where the floor had transformed into a flowing river of silvery light, carrying whispers of children who had been forgotten long ago. The river's surface shimmered, showing visions of distant villages, laughing and crying children, and shadows of parents who never returned. Amara hesitated at the edge, her small feet barely touching the glowing water. But the woman's gentle hand reassured her. Every forgotten soul has a story, and those who listen can find strength. The river whispered in tones older than time, telling tales of neglect, loss, and courage. And each ripple seemed to hum a lesson into Amara's heart. Shadows rose from the water, forming shapes of animals and spirit serpents weaving through the currents. Lions standing sentinel on floating stones, and birds gliding above with wings of light, all observing her, testing her bravery. Floating books drifted along the river like small boats, their pages opening to show ancient patterns, magic, and symbols of protection for those left behind. Amara stepped carefully, letting the water brush her ankles, feeling both fear and awe as the whispers grew louder, merging into a song that carried the wisdom of the ancestors. The mystical woman guided her to a small island at the river's center, where a tree with silver leaves glowed softly, roots entwined with trinkets, toys, and objects forgotten by children who had been left alone. "This tree," the woman said, "remembers everything, and teaches those who are willing to listen." Amara placed her hand on the trunk, and visions of her parents' carelessness flowed through her mind, not as blame, but as understanding that neglect often opens doors to unseen worlds. She saw children laughing with spirits, learning courage and wisdom, and realized she too had a place in this lineage of the guided. Shadows bent closer, whispering encouragement, and a lion's spirit nodded, its amber eyes reflecting both the river and the girl's growing confidence. The blue light from the river illuminated floating desks and books that spun gently, revealing forgotten lessons and secret knowledge of ancestors. Amara learned that even when parents fail, the world's unseen protectors notice, guiding children who are willing to see, listen, and grow. Night deepened, and the red dust of Nedaba swirled through broken windows, carrying echoes of children's laughter and distant drums, reminding her that magic exists wherever hearts are left unguarded. By dawn, the river's light faded, leaving only a faint shimmer, and the mystical woman guided Amara back to the courtyard, her eyes full of pride. "You have learned well," she whispered. "Remember the whispers, carry their lessons, and know that even forgotten children can find their path." Amara stepped onto solid ground, feeling the red dust beneath her feet and the courage in her heart, ready to return to the world of the living, changed, wiser, and stronger, carrying with her the knowledge that neglect could lead to discovery, that spirits always watch over the overlooked, and that even the most forgotten child could find guidance, magic, and protection in the unseen world. As Amara stepped further into the mystical school, the courtyard transformed into a vast space where shadows flickered and danced like living entities, stretching long and bending unnaturally under the red moonlight that seeped through broken windows and crumbling walls. Each shadow seemed to whisper her name softly, carrying the echoes of children who had been forgotten by their parents, their voices blending with the hum of ancestral spirits and the distant rhythm of drums that no one played but everyone felt. The mystical woman guided her along the twisting path, explaining, "Every neglected child leaves a mark upon the unseen world, and the shadows remember." The ground beneath her feet shimmered faintly, glowing with traces of the footsteps of children who had walked this path before her, teaching courage, patience, and the subtle language of listening to the whispers of the unseen. As she moved, the shadows formed shapes: lions prowling silently, serpents slithering through the air, and birds with glowing eyes circling above it, observing her, testing her resolve. Floating desks and books drifted around the courtyard like tiny islands, their pages opening to reveal lessons of wisdom, bravery, and ancestral knowledge for those willing to see and learn. In the center, a large fountain had appeared, its water glowing with soft blue light, reflecting the flickering shadows and amplifying the whispers that floated on the night air. And Amara realized that even neglect could awaken magic in places where it had been overlooked for generations. She approached the fountain carefully, the water cool against her fingertips, and visions of children learning from spirits, gaining courage and wisdom, flowed through her mind, teaching her that fear could be transformed into understanding and strength. The mystical woman's voice guided her. "Listen to the shadows. They speak truths the world often forgets." Amara closed her eyes, allowing the flickering shadows to envelop her senses, feeling their lessons seep into her heart, teaching her patience, empathy, and the importance of courage when one is left alone. Suddenly, the shadows bent closer, forming shapes of other children who had been forgotten, their faces faintly glowing as they silently welcomed her into their fold, offering her guidance and reassurance. The courtyard shimmered with light and shadow as the ancestral spirits swirled above, whispering in tones older than time, teaching Amara that every neglectful act carried unseen consequences, and that forgotten children could become stronger, wiser, and more perceptive than those constantly protected. By the first light of dawn, the red moon had faded, and the courtyard returned to a quiet, earthly space, the flickering shadows retreating but leaving their lessons embedded in her heart. Amara felt the warmth of the mystical woman's hand, and she understood fully that the path of the forgotten was not one of punishment, but of empowerment, wisdom, and resilience. Stepping into the red dust courtyard of the school, Amara knew she carried with her the knowledge and courage of the spirits, ready to face her careless parents and the world beyond. With a heart strengthened by the lessons of the shadows, the whispers of the ancestors, and the magic that lingered in every corner of the mystical school. As the night deepened over Indaba, Amara followed the mystical woman through a hidden doorway that opened onto a grand hall, where the air shimmered with soft golden light, and faint whispers of ancestors seemed to flow from the walls themselves, echoing through the cavernous space like an invisible river. The hall was lined with towering pillars carved with the faces of children long forgotten, each expression a mixture of joy, sorrow, and warning, and the floor glowed faintly beneath her feet, tracing patterns of footsteps she had never walked but somehow felt connected to. Floating books drifted between the pillars, their pages flipping to reveal ancient symbols, mystical maps, and tales of children guided by spirits through neglect and hardship, showing Amara that those abandoned were never truly alone. Shadows shifted along the walls, forming figures of lions, serpents, and birds with glowing eyes that moved in silence, watching her, testing her courage. And as she passed, the whispering grew louder, carrying the advice and warnings of those who had walked this path before. The mystical woman spoke softly, "The ancestors watch the forgotten, and their wisdom will teach you lessons the living cannot." Amara stepped carefully, feeling the weight and warmth of the unseen world settle over her, and noticed faint faces in the golden glow. Children who had been left behind, their eyes shining with hope and courage, silently welcoming her to their fold. At the hall's center stood a raised platform where a large, ancient drum floated, pulsing with blue light and reverberating with the whispers of generations. Amara felt the vibrations through her feet, her chest, her very soul, understanding that the drum was the heartbeat of the forgotten, carrying the knowledge and courage of all those who had been abandoned yet protected by spirits. She knelt beside it, placing her hands on its glowing surface, and visions flashed before her eyes. Children learning to listen to the unseen, animals guiding them through perilous paths, and mystical symbols teaching them wisdom beyond ordinary understanding. The shadows drew closer, forming a protective circle around her, their whispers blending into a song of courage, patience, and resilience, teaching Amara that even the careless acts of parents could not diminish the strength that lay within a child guided by spirits. Hours or moments passed indistinguishably as the hall enveloped her, and when the first rays of dawn crept through shattered windows, the whispers softened but left their lessons indelibly imprinted on her heart. The mystical woman turned to Amara and said, "You are now part of this lineage. Never forget the forgotten, for their strength is hidden but eternal. As Amara stepped back into the courtyard, the red dust beneath her feet felt warmer, the shadows receding yet lingering in memory, and she realized fully that she carried with her the courage, knowledge, and magic of the Hall of Whispering Ancestors. She was no longer merely a forgotten child. She was a witness to the power of the spirits, ready to face her careless parents, the world, and the mysteries beyond, strengthened by the lessons of a world that only revealed itself to those who were truly left behind. As Amara stepped through an arched doorway at the far end of the mystical school, she found herself in a vast garden bathed in the soft glow of moonlight and dotted with silver-leafed trees, each one growing from soil that shimmered faintly with the memories of children who had been forgotten by their parents long ago. The air was filled with a chorus of whispers, carrying secrets, laughter, and the occasional sigh of sorrow from the unseen, and the wind seemed to hum in harmony with the heartbeat of the garden, guiding Amara forward along paths lined with floating lanterns that flickered with the spirit's light. Every step she took stirred the red dust into miniature swirls that glowed faintly, revealing faint silhouettes of other children who had walked these paths before her, their eyes filled with courage, curiosity, and wisdom learned from neglect and spirit guidance. The mystical woman walked beside her, her hand warm and reassuring, whispering, "The garden teaches that what is forgotten can bloom if tended with courage and heart." Shadows moved among the trees, taking shapes of animals, lions with glowing amber eyes, snakes weaving through silver roots, and birds gliding above with wings of light, each observing Amara and silently offering lessons of bravery, patience, and resilience. Floating books drifted above flower beds, opening to reveal tales of children who had transformed fear into strength, and the air shimmered with faint blue sparks, carrying the magic of forgotten worlds into the mortal realm. In the garden's center, a crystal-clear pond reflected the moon, showing not Amara's face, but the faces of children who had learned to navigate both the living world and the unseen, their expressions serene yet alert, teaching her that guidance could come from the most unexpected places. She knelt beside the pond, touching the water lightly, and visions of herself learning courage, patience, and wisdom flowed through her mind, showing her that neglect could open doors to realms of power, insight, and understanding far beyond ordinary life. The shadows drew closer, forming protective shapes around her while whispering guidance, reminding Amara that even when parents falter, the world of spirits watches, teaches, and strengthens those left behind. Hours or perhaps minutes passed in this mystical place, the silver leaves rustling as though applauding her resolve, and Amara felt a deep connection to the lineage of children guided by the spirits of the African lands. When the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, the garden's glow softened, the floating books settled gently on the soil, and the mystical woman smiled, saying, "You carry the courage of all forgotten children. Walk with it always, and let it guide you through the world beyond." Amara stepped back onto the red dust of the courtyard, feeling the strength of the garden within her heart, ready to face her careless parents, the challenges of the world, and the knowledge that even when forgotten, she was never truly alone, protected by the spirits, the shadows, and the whispers of African lands that always watched over the overlooked. As the first light of dawn crept over Endaba, Amara found herself standing at the edge of the mystical school. The red dust of the courtyard warm beneath her small feet, carrying with it the memories, lessons, and courage she had gathered from the spirits, shadows, and ancestors over the past nights. The mystical woman stood beside her, her blue eyes glowing faintly in the morning sun, whispering, "You have learned well. The world awaits your bravery, and those who forget will witness your strength." The school, once mundane and quiet, now shimmered with residual magic, floating books drifting lazily above the courtyards, shadows of animals stretching toward the rising sun, and faint whispers of children's laughter echoing in the air. A reminder that the unseen world was always near for those willing to listen. Amara held tightly to her satchel, now filled not only with books, but with the wisdom and courage of children who had been forgotten before her. And she realized that her parents' neglect had opened a doorway to knowledge she could never have imagined. As she walked through the corridors one last time, the shadows bowed subtly, the floating desks and lanterns settling gently on the ground, and the silver-leafed trees of the garden swayed in an unseen wind, their leaves whispering blessings upon her. She paused at the pond that reflected not her own face, but the faces of children past, present, and future, understanding fully that the spirits of the forgotten were her allies, guiding her through a world that often overlooked those most in need. The mystical woman placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder and said, "Return now, and remember that courage, wisdom, and magic are born from the unseen, and even those left behind can shape the world." As Amara stepped out of the school's gate into the waking village, the red dust swirling softly around her, she saw her parents approaching, panic and regret etched across their faces, and she smiled faintly, knowing that she was no longer the frightened child they had forgotten, but a brave, wise, and empowered girl who had learned the language of shadows, the whispers of ancestors, and the hidden strength of African spirits. Villagers watched quietly as she walked through the streets, the faint glow of the magical lessons she had absorbed shimmering around her like a protective aura. And even the animals seemed to sense the courage that now resided within her. Every step carried the weight and promise of the mystical school, the floating books, shadowed animals, ancestral whispers, and the silver-leafed trees, all teaching her that neglect need not be permanent, that guidance and magic were always near, and that the unseen world watches over the overlooked. By the time Amara reached her parents, the first sunbeams illuminated her glowing, confident eyes, reflecting not fear, but the knowledge that even when forgotten, a child could find strength beyond imagination. Her parents knelt, tears streaming down their faces, and Amara held her head high, feeling the spirits and whispers within her guiding every heartbeat, ready to teach them and the world that courage, wisdom, and magic are born from the overlooked, and that a forgotten child could never truly be lost.